So, our topic today is finding the hero within. You know, we all have parts of ourselves, and most of us are so critical, we're so self-critical, we're always pushing ourselves, finding what's wrong, what we should have done better, where we failed here, that we rarely take the time to ask ourselves or look for, what have I done right? Where have I been helpful? How have I ever been a hero? I like to say heroine, but I guess that word is falling out of use these days. Where have I helped my fellow human man? We rarely do that. We're so busy criticizing ourselves and finding what needs to improve. So that is where we were going with our talk, and still are, but it's morphed a little bit. And that we have a member of our congregation who usually sits right up front with his wife, who a month ago had a stroke, Tony Fabrizio. He's the gentleman who, when I earlier in the year said, does anybody here do QuickBooks? Because I'm in the position of doing everything, computer-wise for our center, because we're a small group, and I'm accustomed to having staff. So here I am doing the books, and I don't know how to do QuickBooks. And Tony raised his hand and said, yes, I'll teach you how. And he did, very kindly. He was so helpful. And so about a month ago, he had a stroke, coming to church. And they instead, called the EMTs, and they got him to the hospital right away, and he did get the clot-busting shot, but he was left with paralysis on one side. And while we visited him in the hospital and he seemed to be making a recovery, he had some complications that sent it downhill. And over this weekend, we've been doing like a mental prayer vigil all weekend because it looked like he was going to make his transition yesterday. And instead, he's in hospice. So it had us thinking all weekend about how does one prepare for this? How does one prepare for what we call death? In our movement, we call it a transition, because we know it's not really death. You can't die. You can simply walk through a door to spirit life. But nevertheless, our human ego part, that feels like death. That feels like a no-no. And we are scared to death of it most of our lives. And we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to, certainly not our own death. I mean, it's hard enough to think about our loved one's death, but certainly not our own. And we do everything to avoid it. And when you're my age, I looked back over the last couple of days about how much time do I spend making sure I stay healthy. Do I eat right? Do I exercise? Am I taking the right supplements? Am I having the right positive thoughts? Do I do the right affirmative prayers? It's all my focus is on staying alive, staying strong and healthy. That I've not wanted to look at my own transition time. And yet that's exactly what we need to do to experience what we call a conscious death, or I call conscious transition. Well, how in the world do you have a conscious transition? Well, it's a process, but it involves thinking about it. It involves giving that at least a fraction of the time that you spend staying alive. And it's a two-part process. It's both psychological and it's spiritual. The psychological part is you've probably been doing all of your life, but you want to give it some more time. You might even have a journal. It's called a life review. And you're to go back over your memories of those disappointments, those losses, and those triumphs that you've experienced in life. The wins and the losses that you've had, and how you felt about them. And who you want to give credit for and thank that helped you along the way, and who you might want to forgive, including yourself. You want to have self-compassion through this process, and you want to have self-love and self-forgiveness. which can be harder than doing it for someone else. And I must tell you, just thinking about it the last couple of days, the process has begun for me. I was doing it in my dreams last night. And I can tell you, it's not easy. This is not easy stuff. Because when you go back and think about those hard times, those losses, you feel it all over again. But as you feel it, this time you need to ask yourself those questions. Who do I need to thank? Who do I need to forgive? Including myself. And you don't have to decide who was right or wrong, or who done you wrong. That's not the issue. The issue is, who do I need to forgive? And you don't need them to know that you're forgiving them. As a matter of fact, in my experience with working with 12-step, with making amends, you know that process? I've done it working through my own codependency issues, but also working with clients as a psychotherapist. And I can tell you that making amends part, you never go tell the person, by the way, I've forgiven you now. Because you know what they say? You forgiven me for what? What did I do? You know, so they won't recognize that they ever had any part. We're all busy defending ourselves and defending our actions, so they won't recognize that they needed to, because they're not introspective either. But as you do this, you will begin to see who you need to forgive. You don't tell them about it. Don't have to tell them what they did wrong. Forgiveness is not about that. It's about understanding they probably weren't out to hurt you. They weren't after you, they were after theirs. Do you see what I mean? People generally are not out to get you or hurt you. They generally are out to make sure they get what they want, what they think they need. And inadvertently, they often hurt you. But this life review is very important. This is the psychological part. So the two things you want to be looking for and try to feel in each situation is gratitude or forgiveness. Because if you view it in any other way, if you take that victimhood with you into the next life, you will not have learned your lesson. You will not have gained the benefit of that experience. We all came here for experience. You chose this. This was a great gift for you to have this lifetime. You're very lucky to get to incarnate this time. You might think about thanking your parents for being willing to have you come through. I know some of you aren't so grateful, but you need to thank your parents that they allowed you to be the vehicles to come through. And they were doing the best that they could, and many of them did a fabulous job. So this life is a gift, and it has not been easy. Nobody gets through Earth School without challenges. That's what you're here for. And you're here to learn through those challenges and to be broadened. Wisdom comes from experience. Wisdom cannot be given to someone. It must be earned. You must become wise through experience. So, and there's no other way. Don't we wish there were an easier way? But there is no other way. So that's the psychological part. Now, what is the spiritual part? The spiritual part is getting to know yourself as spirit. How do you do that? Well, I find the easiest way is through meditation. Because basically you have to become aware of yourself as spirit, you have to kind of not do all the things you generally do as a human being, which is busy responding to stimuli out there, responding to other people, responding to the work you need to get done, responding to stories that you're watching on TV, news that you're watching on TV, any of those things. In other words, reacting to the stimuli that you're taking in through your senses. You cannot become aware of yourself as spirit while you're doing that. So meditation is perfect. Solitude, prayer, meditation, solitude. Solitude in nature. How much time do we spend? Certainly not in the summer months, I know, and here, outside in nature. I was so grateful when Bob said yesterday, do you feel like going to the beach for a walk? At 7 in the morning. And I said, yes, I'd love to. And it was great. The beach was nice breeze. It was in the 70s because of the cloud. And that is just my favorite thing, is to be in the beach for a walk early in the morning. But so often, because we have so many things to do, we won't do those things, and it's called living, take the time to do the things that bring you close to Spirit, bring you close to yourself, bring you joy, and take time away from all those busyness tasks, all that busyness. People who go on vision quests and whatnot, you will go for days out doing treks in the wilderness. Some of them even do it with just a water fast for 3 days. And it's amazing how they can really connect with themselves as Spirit when they do that. None of those outside distractions, nothing going on. Just them connecting with the energy of nature. I'm reading a book by Stephen Levine, who is a meditation teacher, has been for 20 years. And he is the one actually writing this book about how to have a conscious death, how to have a conscious transition. And he said he was out on a trek in the wilderness with a friend who was a Zen meditation person, and he's taught meditation for years. And they were out in the desert in southern Arizona, trekking around, and he got lost. He got lost, and he realized he was not going to be able to find their way back to base camp before dark. And so he finally had to break the news to the Zen meditation guy, and he said, I don't think we're going to get back to base camp tonight. He said, that's okay. Survival is highly overrated. That's a person who is well connected with his Spirit, who knows who he is as Spirit. Because when you're really aware of that part of you, death is not so scary. It's really not so scary. So one of the things that we also did this weekend is reviewed and viewed a lot of near-death experiences. Bob turned on the YouTube channel and started doing some searching. This is something we've been very interested in since the mid-90s when we met Dr. Raymond Moody, who wrote the book Life After Life. He did that. That was his big research project as a young psychiatrist. And he says that now there are over 20 million reported cases in the United States alone. 20 million cases of near-death experience. And yet still our scientific and medical community just poo-poos it and says, the brain's activity as you die. And one of the most interesting was a woman who was a physician. She was actually a back surgeon. And she had spent 15 minutes underwater in a canoe in one of the rivers in South America, and had quite a near-death experience. And of course it totally changed her mind about these things that you call near-death. And she hadn't thought much about religion or spirituality at all since she had been a busy practicing physician. As a kid, she had gone to Sunday school and things like that. But when you're an important scientist, you just don't think about those things. And so it brought her back to many of those teachings, and about life being eternal and things like that. And now she is a practicing physician who totally is respectful of this life after life. As a matter of fact, what everyone says, I haven't heard a single case who talks about their near-death experience. The biggest thing it does for them is it takes away their fear of death. They are never again afraid of dying. As a matter of fact, they look forward to it. Because it felt so good. It felt so good on the other side that they are really looking forward to it. But they've all been told, no, your work is not done. You have stuff to do yet, and they have to come back. Sometimes painfully so. But she says she gave an analogy. That's what her life is like now. She said when she was a kid, she had a very happy home, very happy parent. She loved being home. But when she was about 10 years old, they sent her to summer camp. She wasn't sure she wanted to go. She liked being home. She had great parents, great friends, but she had to go to summer camp. And when she was at summer camp, she made a few friends. It was okay, but she got stung badly by bees and had to go to the hospital. And she was kind of pleased about that because she knew she'd probably get to go home because of that. And sure enough, she did. She got to go home. And she said her living her life today is much like that. She knows eventually she'll have to get stung by the bees or some sort of illness or injury. And that'll be okay because she'll then get to go home. Nice analogy, isn't it? But she's still enjoying, living. And she was, before this happened, she was enjoying her life. Now, as I paint this lovely picture about life on the other side, it does not mean, I'm not urging any of you to go sooner than your time. You have work to do, or you wouldn't be here. You still have stuff to do, or you wouldn't be here. One of the biggest questions that people are asked, or the central one, seems to happen over and over again. What have you done? What have you done if they're doing their life review on the other side? What have you done to help your fellow human beings? And this one man was asked what he had done in childhood, and he's asked to go through the years and tell whoever's questioning him what he's done to help his fellow human beings. And so I started asking myself that, and for a while I couldn't think of anything I had ever done to help anybody as a child. Childhood can be tough, It's you're busy surviving, you're busy, and kids are mean. So you spend a lot of your time putting on insulation so people can't hurt you. I wasn't thinking much about helping anybody else. So I actually asked Spirit to help me. Spirit, help me see who I might have helped as a child. And I got the answer. I was really helpful to my mother. And I was so glad that the Spirit revealed that to me because, except for my best friend, I always had one best friend, I don't remember helping anyone. Maybe more will come to me. But as I say, we're not accustomed to looking back in our own life and saying, well, what did I do right? And yet that's an important question to ask also. So know that that's coming, and know that that may be your primary mission. Your mission was not to come here and to be a great, successful person. It might be for some, that might be Elon Musk's purpose. He might be here to accomplish great things. But for most of us, it's smaller acts of kindness, learning to become a wise, compassionate person. And the physician that I told you about, when she went to the other side, I've always heard you're greeted by loved ones, but I think I projected that meant your family that loved you when you were here. She said, no, these were friends that have known each other since the beginning of time. And they were there, greeting and saluting and saying, great job, and good to see you again, and things like that. I thought, how interesting that is. Friends who have known you since the beginning of time. That gives you a sense of that you are so much more than this skin-encapsulated ego that we often mistake ourselves as being. We are eternal spirit. And so as we prepare to make our own conscious transition, that's what we need to be aware of. We need to be aware that we're just spirit going to spirit. Who you are basically does not change. You drop this body, but you'll probably be ready to let it go anyway at that time. And it's not a loss, it's a gain. So that is my message of finding your inner hero, and also preparing and spending some time psychologically and spiritually identifying, your life's journey, what you've learned, and how to prepare for letting it go and going to the great beyond. And so it is. Thank you.